One session here on the hierarchy. So we're going to take a look at how to set up your workspace for success this afternoon. So let's take a look at this demo workspace that I have here. And we're going to dive into what is really the heart of the ClickUp platform, and that's the hierarchy. So if you want to take a look with me over on the left-hand side here, this is the sidebar. And you'll notice that I have a client space and a space right here. So these are spaces, and these spaces are in your workspace. So what you're seeing, all this area right here, this is your workspace. So you can think of your workspace as your entire organization. So this is where all of your folks are operating out of the platform. If you go down to this avatar menu in the bottom corner here, you can select that. And you can actually see all of the workspaces that you're a part of. So you'll notice that I have quite a few here. I'm very popular, but we're going to be working out of the Acme Enterprises workspace today. And that workspace is going to hold all of the information, all of the work that is relevant to my Acme Enterprises organization. So I'm going to click out of this menu here. You can join as many workspaces as you like. But you just want to make sure that if you're operating a business or operating some sort of initiative, you want to keep all of the work that's related to that business inside a single workspace. It's not as easy to transfer information across workspaces, so you want to keep all of that within the same one. So within this workspace, I've created two spaces. Okay, so spaces are that next level of the hierarchy. We can think of spaces as large containers where we want to keep a particular type of a large area of work. So in this particular example, I have a client space here. And this client space is holding all of the work that I have that's related to the clients that I'm working with. So that's that space there. We can also take a look at this other example here. This is just a space. And within that space, I have a couple other elements here, which we'll get to in just a second. So in the next level of hierarchy we have is the folder. So a folder is actually an optional level of hierarchy. It's a great way to contain different sets of projects or lists. And so if we open up one of these folders here, you'll notice that I have a couple lists in this folder. And these are all lists that relate to work that have to do with my client, Worldwide Widgets, here in this folder. So I'm keeping them all together so that they're all close by, right in that folder, and I have easy access to all the work that's related to that particular client. If I go into my list here, a list is where our actual work lives. So this is where the tasks are. Okay, so the tasks are the most basic level of the hierarchy. They are sort of the building block of the platform. And this is where your actual work is stored and happens and moves to completion. So when we might have a list, and a list might be like a project, or it could be a time frame, or it could be a location. It's something that we want to track like types of work around. And so we can go and keep all of we can think of tasks as maybe steps to complete a project. We can keep all of those in a list, and that's where they live. That's their home. So now if we take a look at a particular task, we can get a little closer look at this next level here. So this is called Task View. Okay, and Task View is going to show us all the details around a piece of work. So we can get the name of the task. We can write a description. We have all kinds of great formatting options for descriptions. We can create checklists. We can do headings and banners and all kinds of great ways to make this colorful and beautiful here. And then we can also add additional layers of hierarchy from within the task. So there's actually another layer here called a subtask. And a subtask is a way to break down a piece of work even further. If something is a little bit more complicated or requires additional steps within that piece of work, we can create additional levels of hierarchy using subtasks. And if things are getting particularly complicated, we can actually create nested subtasks up to 7 levels within the subtask itself. So I can actually show you that here. So we're going to minimize that task. That's a nifty trick. We can put that in our task tray down there. And we can head over to my A space here. So we'll just close that space, that client space, and we'll take a look at A space. And we'll go into a folder and to a list. And in this task, we will notice I have a subtask, and then I actually have a nested subtask. Okay, so another level of the hierarchy that, or a complementary feature within the hierarchy that's sort of similar to a subtask, but a little more straightforward and process oriented, is adding a checklist within the task. So if the subtask doesn't require due dates or priorities or additional levels of customization or needs to move through its own status set, we can actually add a checklist here. So these are great for things that we want to check off as either done or not done, or repeatable processes that happen over and over again. We can use checklists to do that. So we can just add that checklist here. And then when it's finished, we can check it off, and it will be part of the completed checklist items there. We can also add an assignee to checklist items, just like subtasks and tasks as well. Okay, so now we kind of have an idea of the basics of all the elements within the hierarchy. But there's a little bit more to the hierarchy here so that we can be the most successful. And that really has to do with customizing how we see the work at each level within the hierarchy. So there's different levels of customization with working with different features that we can create at each level. For example, if we want to take a look at, think about views. Views are essential to how we see the work within the hierarchy. So for example, I'm going to be in my A space here. So I'm going to select this level of the hierarchy. Okay, so I'm in A space. And if I go up to this menu here next to A space, you notice that you always be able to see where you're at, where you've selected in the hierarchy. If you take a look on the left-hand side of this menu up here, you'll notice that I have a couple tabs, and these tabs are my views. So right now I'm looking at a list view of A space. Okay, a list view is different than a list. So a list view is a way of seeing all of the work laid out in a list format. A list over here on the left-hand side in the sidebar is a container for your tasks. Okay, so this is a list, and we're seeing a list in a list view on this side over here. So again, if I am selecting this level of the hierarchy, this space right here, I'm able to see all of the work inside that's contained in this space. So if I go up to my views here, anytime I'm in A space and I create a view from A space, it's going to include all the work that's inside the space. So if I have a task in another list, you'll notice that another list does not live inside of a folder. Okay, another list lives in a space. But if I create a task in another list, I'll be able to see that task within the view of A space. There's right there, because that task lives within the space. Okay, now if I go into a folder, so let's go into a folder here, you'll notice I no longer have access to viewing another list's tasks. That's because when I select this level of hierarchy, I'm only able to see all of the work that lives inside of that particular area. So at the folder level, if I'm in that folder and I have multiple lists, so let's add another list in here. Let's add a task in this list. One way we can add a task is we can actually just hit the T on our keyboard, and that's going to pop this handy dandy task creator right here. And generate in the second list. It should pop up. We'll just make another one. Okay, so we've got this second list here. And then if I go back up into my folder level of the hierarchy, so a folder here, you'll notice that I have that second list task as well as all the tasks I have in a list. Okay, so I'm seeing all of the work that's contained in this folder. So why is this important? This is really important because we're able to maximize visibility on specific areas within the workspace if we create views at different levels of the hierarchy. So if I want to work out of all of my clients, and say I'm managing a number of clients out of my client space, and I want to know what's going on with all of those clients, I can leverage the hierarchy and views to see all that work across the client space simply by containing it in the same space and creating a view at that level of the hierarchy. So if I go into client space, you'll notice I'm able to see all of the work that lives inside of that client space. If I want to just focus on a specific client, then I'm going to go into that folder and I can create views that show me all of the work across that particular client. And if I want to get super granular and specific, I can go into the list and I can create views at the list level in order to keep my focus on just the work for that particular project. Now, we also want to take a look at statuses and custom fields. So statuses and custom fields are two other areas that are directly related to the hierarchy. So depending on where you're at in the hierarchy and you create statuses and custom fields, those statuses and custom fields are going to cascade down in that hierarchy and apply to all of the areas that are contained within that area that you've selected. So again, for example, if I create a client space and I go into my ellipses menu here, down to statuses, and I create a custom status set for my entire client space, this is going to apply to all of the elements within that space. So I can do, for example, I'll just use this, we'll use the normal status set here, and I will save that. And now that status set is applied to all of these elements within this space. And it's limited to this particular space. So within a space down here, I can actually create a whole other status set that applies to everything within a space. Okay, so the space is sort of the top level that we can do this on. And then if I want to change the status set within a level beneath the space, I can go into any of these levels here. So if, say, I wanted to apply a status set to all of the projects within a particular folder, I can go into the ellipses menu here, and then I can actually go to the statuses down here, and I can either use the space statuses. You'll notice I have access to these if I go into this menu, or I can create this my own custom status set that's going to apply to the Worldwide Widgets folder. Okay, so if I have a client or an initiative that has its own, that needs its own status set that's different than the rest of the work that I'm doing in the space, I can go ahead and I can customize that right out of that menu there. And I can do that all the way down again to the list level. And this is really important if I'm working out of maybe different types of projects within a particular initiative or with a client. So again, for example, if we think of Worldwide Widgets as a client, I might have projects that I'm doing with whichever work that I'm doing, if I'm doing marketing work or accounting work, whatever it is. And those different types of projects might generally have the same steps that are required to completion. But I also might have other processes that the client needs to go through, like an onboarding, for example. And the steps to onboard that client, to get them into my business as a new client, are going to be different than the work that I'm doing on a particular project for the client, right? So I might go into my onboarding list and I might create at this level of the hierarchy a status set that's customized to that particular list, that particular type of list. We can also leverage templates here to make this super efficient. So if I build out a structure that works, that's repeatable for myself. So for example, again, if I wanted to build out, say, a client folder that had lists of standard projects that I typically do for clients, maybe an onboarding list to get them into my system, I can build that out And then I can save this structure that I've built by going into the highest level that I want to template. So in this case, we're going to go into the folder. I can go into that ellipses menu here. I can go down into our template center, and I can save it as a template. So anytime that I get a new client, it's really easy to create a whole new folder for that client simply by adding that template into the space. And to do that, I'm just going to go up into my space. I can create a new folder. I can go to templates. And if I had saved that, so for example, I have this mock client folder here, I can apply that template and I'll get a new instance of that folder ready to go for my new client. So really great way to save a lot of time and make that process really efficient just by templating different structures of the hierarchy that you use often. Okay, so that is the basics there. And I think one last thing that I would like to touch on is to think about why you might use different levels of the hierarchy, or how you might go about thinking about how to strategically structure your space and which elements to choose to use. So one of the key things to think about when you're doing this and you're starting to lay out your structure is to think about scale. So for example, sometimes it's tempting to want to use a space for all of your clients, to give all of your clients a space. Now, this is a great way to organize your work if you have clients who have really complicated projects. Maybe you have teams that are devoted specifically to a particular client, and you really need to have them focused in one area within the structure. If you do that, then what's going to happen is you're going to have to leverage the everything view in order to see work across the space. And if we do that, there's a couple different tricks we can use. We can use some tags, labels, things like that to group and filter by. Otherwise, if we leverage, like we did earlier, the folder system with lists for projects, we can get all the insight across all of our clients just by going into that client space there. So something to think about, how complicated the work is that you're doing for each level of the hierarchy that you're working out of is going to determine how many lists. Do I use folders? Do I use spaces? This is definitely something that we can help you out with on a coaching call. So feel free to stop by the coaching booth, pick up that link, and we'd love to talk to you about your workflow and making sure that this hierarchy is set up for your success. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I look forward to talking with you more. Have a great time at LevelUp.